What's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to a special edition of Bad Publicity. Today, for those people that use us as your only news source in this game, we really appreciate you. But yeah, what we're gonna do today is we were gifted a Star-Lord ally spoiler. And we're going to reveal it and talk about it. This has hit the interwebs, so if you are keen, cunning, and have really, really kept up in all of the forums everywhere, you might have seen this. So, thanks for being here anyway for this, but this is the time that we kind of were able to get together and reveal this card. So, without further ado, what we're here to talk about today is the brand new ally inside of the Star-Lord pack, which is COSMO. COSMO the dog. Let me throw up a spoiler warning right there. The graphics department was working overtime.
Oh man, how do we afford it?
No one knows, man. We're a non-profit here.
No.
Not for profit. So COSMO is a ally that will be included in your Star-Lord pack purchase. He's a 2-cost, 1 thwart, 1 attack, with 2 health. The cool part about this is that he is tagged with the Guardian trait, so we will talk about that a little bit. But what we have here is a cool mechanical interrupt that when COSMO attacks or thwarts, name a card type. Then discard the top card of a deck. That's cool. We'll get into that. If that card is of the same type, COSMO does not take consequential damage. The damage under thwart or attack for this use. So that's kind of really cool, really interesting. There's a lot of stuff going on here. A lot of stuff that lines up for fun, weird, bad publicity loving cards. So the real question, we'll answer at the end is, do we love this card? But let's talk about some scenarios where this plays out. What I will do right here is put up the actual Star-Lord card as a great place to start. I'll hit some points here and then flip it to Corey to tie my ramblings together. This is the Star-Lord hero. Now you can see that Star-Lord himself is also a Guardian, but what Star-Lord is going to do is each ally you control gains the Guardian trait. So this is, COSMO comes in this pack. Now, Star-Lord is already giving his allies the Guardian trait. So we're hoping that probably there's a lot more of other cards out there that will buff Guardian cards. We can touch on some of those. Some maybe we haven't seen yet. And we're only talking about cards that will be officially revealed. So that being said, at least when you're in hero form, allies are getting the trait, and then you're flipping it back the other way in alter ego, and he would remove those. So at least COSMO is going to be sticky from that sense. Corey, I'll turn it over to you. I kind of set the stage for you. Why don't you come on up and take the mic?
Yeah. So you want me to go into? I guess the first thing is there's one or two cards I think we found that immediately will synergize okay with COSMO. But I guess to build a little bit more on your point, COSMO already comes with the Guardian trait. He seems like a better ally to play in other Guardian decks outside of Star-Lord, because Star-Lord already gives his allies the Guardian trait, so you're kind of stacking something he already has. But so he might be a better one to slot into other decks when you're either going to be playing with a Star-Lord leadership who's going to play with Guardian buffs and things like that, so you can have some allies that could benefit, specifically from a card that we'll talk about called Blaze of Glory. It seems to be the best one we've seen, so it's just to recap it, 2-cost leadership event, max 1 per round. As a hero action, each Guardian character gets +2 thwart and +2 attack this phase. And at the end of the phase, deal 1 damage to each Guardian character. So he's not going to be able to avoid the damage part on the end of it, but you're probably get some extra uses and buff him. That's pretty neat. That way you could slot in a neutral in another like Guardians deck or another hero deck in general that's going to be playing with Guardians in your pod that could benefit from this card to get you some extra mileage and stuff out of it if the timing and everything works out right. A few other things to bring up on it. So one, his costing is fine, right? 2 cost for 1/1 with 2 health, not bad at all. And you could just luckily get some extra mileage out of him.
Yeah.
So if you're using them to like sit here and like tap a little side scheme here and there, or just pick off some like weakened minions, you could get lucky and you might get them for like an extra activation or 2 than expected, which isn't bad.
Yeah, and there is a buff card inside of Star-Lord's pack, right?
His title buffs Guardians, but it's only his Guardians.
Yeah, with the leader of the Guardians for sure.
Right, but he's already given the Guardian trait to anything anyway. Like, yeah, it'll give the buff to Cosmo. It's just the fact that like he already has the Guardian tag anyway. It's just like, okay, I get it, but his ability is already like giving him Guardians. So it's not like the Avengers leadership decks where you have to specifically hunt out everything with the Avenger keyword. Otherwise, you've got to play with the title, like the honorary Avenger. Star-Lord's kind of getting rid of that, is making everything a Guardian. So like the benefit of him having the Guardian keyword is kind of like, okay, I get it in his pack, but like
I just wanted to touch on it because I already had that card queued up, so I just needed an excuse to put the leader's card to throw it up.
Yeah, no, that's totally cool. But what is neat about Cosmo is that he can pick any deck and you can name a card type. So if you play with like an ally who's had a way to peek at the top card of his deck and he knows that's not something he needs and he wants to get rid of it to try to draw something better, you could let them name the card. They could flip it, do the effect, and clear the top of their deck to try to dig something faster. You could even pick the encounter deck. And just try to guess off of that. So if someone has looked or placed the top card of the encounter deck and they know it's coming and they're like, guys, we don't want it, Cosmo can swing in to do something and then go ahead and discard the top card of the encounter deck over there to try to get rid of stuff. There's some really interesting interactions that would have to create some pretty dynamic like team play to try to like really benefit from it. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Maybe
as like a Hail Mary. Quick save. You could pick Doctor Strange's little spell deck.
I mean, technically, I guess that works, right? It's a deck in play. That's hilarious. That is really funny. I wonder how the interaction actually plays through. Anyway, I'll look into that in a minute. But the other little thing to add in is that's really funny, though. It's cracking me up. Is he is a science. He's a neutral with a science icon. So there's also something you can play with if you need to build more science icons for some themes and stuff like that, like Spider-Man. I know there's like decks I'm missing, but there's some things that you really want to trigger off the science icons. He's a neutral ally that can do it. That's cheap, right? He's not badly costed for what he does. And sometimes that's okay, especially if you're doing like solo play, you want to slot in some extra allies that can generate the correct symbols you need. It's a good option to consider.
I really like the mechanics built around this card. I think that it is it touches some interesting points that both Corey and I have talked about in the past, about allies being too overly costed for what they do, and about the use of traits and the use of cool mechanics in a card game. And so this kind of checks a lot of different boxes, but it leaves me with a very lukewarm feeling, though, about where I'm going to use it right now from the full set of stuff that we've seen. Because I don't think you're going to typically use this in a very ally heavy build. There's other allies out there that cards that you're getting discounts on allies or buffing a lot of allies and stuff like that. So in those senses, you want those mid-range, thicker card allies that are going to stick around. But at 2 costs, this is great. As a neutral, I'm glad this versatility exists to move this around. It's not a Star-Lord specific ally. 2 health.
Yeah.
And then I'm very intrigued about the future. This card sets up a lot of future potential for the peak mechanic, right? Like if there's a lot more, like we see a lot of stuff where you discard the card. We don't see a lot of peek at the card to set up some of these things. But it is very interesting, because then what you're essentially doing too is, I'm saving myself. Is it really necessary for me to save a lower cost 2 health hero to get that extra play out of him? So he's going to be in there 2 rounds instead of that, or 3 rounds instead of that extra 1 round, maybe, or 3, 4. I mean, whoever knows how lucky you can be. But at the same time, you're essentially advancing the clock on something. You're advancing the clock on a deck. So you're either getting through your deck tiniest bit quicker, or you're advancing that encounter deck a tiny bit quicker. Essentially, both times when those decks run out, you are paying a penalty. So, it's going to be strange where you're going to see this used.
Yeah, and the thing is, that is pretty neat about it is, like, you're not paying for that ability, really. Like, normally 2 cost 1/1, 2 health is fine for a base level ally. The little, like, sometimes it'll happen ability, you're not being taxed or having to pay. Like, they didn't make them like a 3 cost and you have to pay for something that may never hit whenever you get a chance to use it. They're not being, like, taxed or punished by the special ability. It does add in, again, as the card pool expands, we get new abilities and things like that. That little interaction can end up being pretty janky and pretty funny. So that's pretty cool. Sorry, you've really made me dig into this Doctor Strange Invocation deck, and it's funny because every single one of those cards is an event, so you could 100% trigger it.
Errata coming soon.
It seems like that would work, but the clarification is if you have a Strange player, you could just keep, like, taking the top card off of his deck and trigger it every single time. If that works, that's hilarious. If not, please tell me how dumb I am for thinking of this in the comments below. But I mean, by the wording on the card, it says a deck, so seems silly.
I mean, the only person that's not going to like it is probably the Strange player, as you're milling his spells.
That's true. That's funny. But hey, man. I guess the other thing to bring up is, like, where it can be useful, right? Again, like, it is a cheap ally. So if it doesn't hit, you're not like, oh man, I invested all this resources in this ally and he didn't do his thing. But, like, the main difference could be, like, let's say example, the Blaze of Glory card we threw back earlier. The difference it can end up being is, like, cool, I swung for 3 or I thwarted 3, and instead of it immediately killing my ally at the end of the turn because he took the damage from the swing and then the 1 from the card, I now can use him as a blocker or use him to do, like, small stuff in the next turn. So it can buy you a little bit extra mileage out of the ally. This could be useful, and it can matter. Again, for just having, like, that blocker going into the villain phase.
And what I really love about the space is that it's very much built from a deck building lover's perspective. That we're saying that being neutral, who knows if the right home for this is inside of Star-Lord. But like Corey said, if there's ways to move this outside. Right now, the consequential damage is 1 hit on a 2 health hero. So the interesting part is how long he can stay around. But I mean, if you can get a deck that buffs allies, and you're making these 1 attack, 1 thwarts, increase, then at that point here he becomes more of an interesting play. But I'm not really sure that you want him to be the cornerstone and you're going to take up deck slots to buff Cosmo and try and get Cosmo online and set up. That seems like one of those weird janky competitive style decks that you might have seen us kind of build or try around in the past in other games. But it's interesting. And I love the fact that something like this is included in the game. I think that this is just a fun card. I think it's going to be fun to use and fun to play around with. For those,
and maybe he's just insanely good in Doctor Strange, because you can use it to keep burning through your invocation deck to get to the spells you need.
There you go.
And and trigger his ability 100% of the time. So silly.
But I do think he's a fun card with a lot of future potential. Glad to see him in neutral, and definitely one that I would say keep your eye on. Keep your eye on, Cosmo. This card down the road could pair up, nicely when you're unexpectedly. So
yeah, cool. I guess as we going to wrap this up, last thing I just want to throw in is a huge thank you to Fantasy Flight Games for sending us this spoiler. And as you mentioned at the beginning, even though savvy individuals know that the entire pack has been leaked and posted, which is kind of a bummer for other content creators who get the ability to get these cards. So shouts to everyone else who's getting one of these cards and still doing videos and releasing the content. But yeah.
Thank you very much, all. We really appreciate you guys watching, tuning in for another Bad Publicity. Show us some love. Fantasy Flight does check our stats, does check our stuff to make sure that people are still tuning in, so we can get these cards earlier and earlier. So any kind of like, any kind of subscribe, any kind of share to show that that this is the content you want from Bad Publicity. That stuff does get back to them. So when they see the engagement rates on these videos like this from us, other content creators, it shows that the demand is out there and the interest for us to do things like this in the future and keep it coming. Really appreciate everyone who's hanging out. Happy May. Stay safe out there, and get ready to kick off a great summer.
Later, everyone.
Happy gaming.